Also, thank you for having me here. So this is going to be a bit of an interactive presentation. Join if you want, don't if you don't want to. But you'll see there's this QR code. We'll be able to kind of vote on some things. You'll be able to ask questions. Again, if you want to, you can use your smartphone. If you don't want to, that's totally cool. So a little bit about me. Like Nick said, I'm an immigration attorney. I'm licensed in Kansas and Missouri. I've been in practice for 13 years. So I will just admit my bias. I practice mostly humanitarian and family-based immigration law. I have seen a lot of changes and things that haven't changed. So what I really want to talk about today is kind of where we are, why we're here, and where I think we could be. So, also I practice in Kansas City, so there's that. All right, so like Nick said, immigration was reported by voters in this past election, earlier this month, to be one of the top 10 issues that influenced how they voted and what they feel is important to our country. As you can see, and if you're logged on, you can see this a lot clearer on your own phone, but we see a pretty big political divide. So 82% of people who indicated that they were going to vote for Trump said that immigration was a very, very important issue influencing their votes. For people who indicated that they would vote for Harris, that's a lot lower, about 39%. But regardless, we can see that this is something that is definitely on the mind of most Americans. So I just kind of want to get a temperature. There's no right or wrong answer here, but if you are on your phone, if you could just rank, how do you feel about immigration? So we have 4 choices. 1, immigrants are destroying our country. 2, we need to be more welcoming to immigrants. 3rd, immigrants are an important part of our community. And 4th, our system is broken. So I'll give you a moment, just weigh in. I'm not going to be able to see anyone's particular name to this. I'm not going to call anyone out, but just kind of want to get an idea of where we are. Okay. So it looks like kind of the overwhelming is that we all agree that immigrants are an important part of our community, but also our immigration system is broken. And not gonna lie, this is exactly how I feel. So let's talk a little bit about what immigration is in Kansas. So 7% of the population of Kansas was born outside of the United States. That's lower than what it is nationally. In the United States, that is about 14% of everyone who lives in the United States was born outside the United States. So not as many immigrants here in Kansas. However, they make a huge impact. So in 2018, immigrants in Kansas contributed over $1 billion in taxes. That is both federal, state, and local. And they're really interesting statistics to me because immigrant-led households, we can see, paid $588 million in state and local taxes. Undocumented immigrants, or people who do not have an immigration status, paid $62.2 million in state and local taxes.
That's right.
So the average GDP, or the average, all the taxes in Kansas are, I think, something like $29 billion. So this is not an insignificant number. So as we can see, that 7% is contributing in a big way to Kansas. Another way that it impacts Kansas is our demographics. So here's another question. What do you think the percentage of people in Seward County who were born outside the U.S.? And if you're not a geography buff, or if you live in Johnson County like I do, this is liberal Kansas, is the big city here.
73%. Are we in Seward County?
No, we're in Douglas. We are in Douglas.
Seward County would be far southwest Kansas.
Yes.
And there's a packing plant.
All right. Thank you all who voted, and that correct answer is 30%. So 30% of everyone right now that lives in Seward County was born outside of the United States. And we can see how immigrants are really impacting rural communities. And here is a good example. So this is the projected population change in the next 50 years. So this is, I think, 2072. Finney County, which, who knows what the big city there is?
Garden.
That's right, Garden City. Currently has a non-white majority in that county. In the next 50 years, the population of Finney County is projected to increase almost by 20%, 18.5%. We can see next door in Lane County, that does not have a big immigrant population. Their population is expected to decline by almost half. So we can see that immigrants do make a really big impact, not only in Kansas, but kind of more specifically in rural communities. So let's talk a little bit about our immigration system, why we need it, what's going on now, and what I think could change. So we're going to talk today about the H-2A visa. Now this is a visa that is specific to agricultural workers, and so we're going to kind of break down how it's being used right now. So right now, 73% of the agricultural workforce was born outside of the United States. That's not specific just to Kansas, this is nationwide. But it is almost 3/4 of everyone who works in agriculture was born outside the United States. Of that number, 50% of agriculture workers are undocumented. And what I mean by undocumented is, in kind of more of the common parlance, is illegal. So this could be someone who came to the United States on a visa, but then stayed past the time it was valid. That can be someone who crossed irregularly across the border. That could be someone who had a legal status, but then was told by a judge that they could no longer have it. So that's kind of generally what this means. So
how do you come up with accurate data for that? Because that, I mean, when you're out in rural Kansas, that's a pretty quiet thing in the background.
And that is a really, really good point. How do we count these people? So on the very last slide, and I'm happy to send this to anyone who wants, I have all the sources that I cited. Getting accurate numbers on people who are undocumented is notoriously difficult to do because it's not really something that someone's going to come by and say, hey, census person, guess who's here illegally? So this is kind of a best guess. And again, this is more nationwide, again, not specific to Kansas. So I hope that this sound works. But this is, does anyone know who Theo Vaughn is? Yeah, so he's more conservative, I think. He's just kind of a silly dude. Anyway, he did this interview with this individual, retired Border Patrol Chief Chris Clem. He was the Border Patrol Chief in Yuma, Arizona, which is one of the most busiest ports of entry in the United States for about 27 years. And so this clip is him talking about what he feels is the problem with immigration. And I'll give it a minute. If it doesn't work, I can just spoil it. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's fine. So if you have your phone, you can go back and watch this clip. But he does a really good job of talking about how the system is kind of set up to fail. Because the system that we have to apply for lawful immigration is very complex. He talks about how, on average, if you are applying for an employee who was born outside the United States, it takes, you're going to come into contact with at least 4 different federal agencies. It's going to take about 2 years, and it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars between the government fees and the filing fees. Oh, yes, sorry. So what his point is that if you are someone who needs an employee, if you are in a situation where you need someone now, trying to go through this petition lawfully kind of puts you at a disadvantage. Or you can hire someone right off the street, you don't ask questions, no one asks you questions, and so this is really how we get into this situation where employers are not incentivized, but they have the option of hiring someone who does not have a valid immigration status. So, the H-2A visa, if you are not familiar with it, this is for, let's see, here we go. It's for a job that is temporary or seasonal, which means that it has to last, the job has to last less than a year. It is before an employee can get a visa for an employer can get a visa for an employee. They have to demonstrate that there are not enough U.S. workers who are willing, able, qualified, and available to do the job. Also, the employer has to show that these foreign workers are not going to adversely affect the wages or the working conditions of U.S. workers. So basically, you're not going to pay them a whole lot less, you're not going to treat them different to undercut what people in the United States would be getting otherwise for the job. So, as you can probably tell, there's a couple difficulties with this, right? Temporary or seasonal. So that could make sense in some industries, but if you're, let's say, a dairy farmer, it's not a temporary or seasonal job. It is year-round. So even though this is designed to kind of be a catch-all for all agriculture workers, there's a lot of holes. Also, it's very complicated. So this is the process for the H-2A visa that you have to go through before you submit your application to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. You have to go through the state workforce agency to prove that this is the job, this is the requirements, this is how much we want to pay. If that works out, then you go to the National Processing Center, which is with the Department of Labor, and only then can you apply with USCIS, and if it gets approved, then you get to apply with the Department of State, who will eventually issue the visas to the foreign workers. So this is a very, very complicated process. And in the year that we last have, this is 2019, there were 258,000 visas issued, which seems like a huge number, but that is less than 4% of the total number of workers that are needed for food production. So this is not even scratching the surface for what is needed.
That's still U.S. numbers?
Yes, these are all for the United States. If we were able to watch this, this is a, I'll just see. Ooh, kind of.
Her father has a dairy farm nearby.
What's your reaction when you hear that immigrants are taking jobs from Americans?
I think it's dumb.
Dumb?
Dumb. It's uninformed. They're not taking your job. You don't want it. You don't want to do it. If you want to, you would be applying when we advertise. My dad wouldn't be looking for milkers all the time. Nearly everyone we know in agriculture is looking for someone.
Case in point, for years, Baker has posted an irrigation job.
We had a couple of people that said, my son would like a job. I never heard from them. Another time we had someone call, say they were interested, and they never showed up. This year we had someone looked at the requirements of the job and decided they didn't want to do it. But he was the only person to actually show up and talk to my husband about the job.
All right, so that is from a farmer in Nevada. And I just kind of want to get your temperature. Have you or someone you know had problem hiring workers, specifically in agriculture? Yes. Okay, so it looks like that clip kind of does reflect what you guys are experiencing. So when we talk about immigration reform, this quote is from Senator John McCain, and this was specifically regarding the 2013 immigration reform bill that he was a part of for the Gang of Eight. Also, fun fact, when I was researching this quote, apparently John McCain said this for just about every bill that he supported. So this is not unique to immigration, but I started my practice in 2011, and so this was kind of at a very critical time for me. And I remember when this bill was introduced thinking, well, this is garbage, right? It's way too heavy on enforcement. This is not really solving the problem. However, I feel like this is a very salient point, because whatever we talk about immigration, whenever we talk about changing immigration, we can all agree it's a problem. We can all agree that what we have right now is not working. However, we all get lost in our feelings. We get lost in the weeds. There is not going to be a perfect solution. However, it needs to stop being the reason that we let this issue just kind of run in the background. It's a problem now. It's been a problem for a long time. And what we need are solutions. And when I say solutions, there have been some bills. There's actually been a lot of bills. But the one we're going to talk about right now is the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. This is actually proposed in the House twice, in 2021 and then last year in 2023. It passed the House both times, but it never went to the Senate. The Senate Majority Leader never brought it to the floor. So let's learn just a little bit about what this would do specific to immigration.
To move on in life.
So here's how the bill would work. Any undocumented worker that has worked in the field for at least 180 days within the past 2 years gets a temporary legal status. This gives them the ability to work and live legally in the United States temporarily. Undocumented farm workers that have worked for 10 years or more would get a green card in 4 years. This would allow them to live and work in the United States permanently, but with no voting rights. Workers that have been here for less than 10 years would get a green card in 8 years. Jonathan
So these are the kind of solutions that are being proposed, that are being talked about. The reason why I think that this would be a really good fix is because anything that we do, amnesty is a dirty word, right? In politics, like we don't want to give amnesty. We do not want to reward these people who did things the wrong way. We don't want to make sure that they're benefiting. We don't want more people to come. However, that ignores the reality that we have about 13 million undocumented people here in the United States, and we cannot keep ignoring the fact that they are here, they are part of our community. Now, a lot of what these proposals, I'm not sure about this one in particular, but there are a lot of bills that would include paying a fine of somewhere between $1,000 to $10,000 per person, which, as you can imagine, would be a nice boost to taxes and to our economy. So let's talk just for a moment, though, about border enforcement, because this is a huge focus of the incoming administration. And we're going to deport everyone on day one. We're going to get the military. Okay, so this is from the Pew Research Center. I think this tells a really interesting story about what happens when we rely only on enforcement. So these yellow lines are when there are enforcement actions. So when you see there's some peaks in the yellow, we see a proportionate dip in the purple. The purple line are people who are trying to come across the border without permission. So what we can see here is that whenever there's a big surge in enforcement, we do see a dip in people crossing, but then we see this big spike in purple. So what this means is that we can try our very best to do enforcement only, but it doesn't stop people coming to the United States. It only delays it a bit, which is why if we are going to be serious about immigration, we need to talk about two things. We need to talk about both the push and the pull factors of why people come to the United States. The push factor, I feel like, is discussed a lot in the news. People are escaping war. People are escaping poverty. Darien Gap, boat people, refugees. But what we don't talk about as much are the pull factors. Why are they coming here? What is incentivizing them to leave their country, to spend lots of money, to risk dying? Because there is opportunities here. Because there are jobs available, because there are communities that would welcome them, and by trying to only focus on the push factors and tell people, no, stay in your country, do not come here, we're ignoring the fact that there are reasons why people come here. So when we think about immigration reform, this is how I, specific to me, again, based on my experience, think that we need to move forward. We need to have more legal pathways. That's just the long and the short of it. We have a need. Agriculture was one example, but another really big area are highly skilled visas. We have a lot of students who come to the United States to study, and they get advanced degrees. They learn skills that we need in our workforce, that we need in our communities. But because we have such a restriction on how many visas we give a year, there are thousands of students who would like to stay here, who would like to continue their work, aren't able to stay. And that is a huge need. Again, the only restriction are those numerical limits. We just need to have more visas. We just need to have more ways for people who want to work here to be able to do so lawfully. We also can't just rely on enforcement alone. We can see, and again, on my last slide, if you have this on your phone, I cite all these sources that I'm mentioning today. Enforcement alone does not work. It does not stop people from coming to the United States. Deporting people also is not a deterrent. So do I think that enforcement needs to be a part? Absolutely. I feel like a lot of times when people advocate for change for immigration, there's this idea that it's black and white. Either you want to let everybody in or kick everybody out. But it has to be more nuanced. I personally, I've seen people who commit crimes and they get deported. Can't say I disagree, because being in the United States is a privilege. Being an American is a privilege. And we are not wrong to have standards for the people who we want to welcome in to our country. So enforcement has to be a part of it. If people are going to break the law, there does need to be consequences, but we also have to have a way for them to do it the right way. Also, and this is just my gratuitous point, we have to treat people like people. Here's this example I can tell you I have seen time and time and time again in my practice. I will meet with someone who doesn't know much about immigration, doesn't know many people who were born outside the United States, hates immigrants, right? They're crossing the border, they're bringing in fentanyl, stealing our jobs, all of the above. But they've met someone. They've met Carlos at their church. They've met Andrea because she cleans their house. And this is a good person. Everyone else does it wrong, but this person, she did it because she wants to protect her family. She did it because she had no other option. And I will have these people come to appointments with me to see what could be done for this person that they care deeply about. And there's just this dissonance that, okay, this is what you feel about this person because you know them, but just realize that this is most people who come to the United States. Not all, I will admit that, but we need to stop talking about these people like they're aliens, they're invaders, they're coming here and they're spoiling our bloodlines. I bet you could guess who said that. Anyway, we need to just have more humanity when we talk about this, because it's so easy to otherize people, but again, I bet most of you here can trace, if you were born in the United States, I bet you can tell me, if you wanted to, where your family was originally from. I will say my family, my dad's side of the family is from Greene, Kansas, and they were farmers until my grandfather was stationed in Salina during World War II and met my grandma, and they started living that suburban life. But her grandparents were born in Bohemia. And it wasn't all that long ago that we too were foreigners in this land. So, that is my spiel. If you would like to ask a question, you can type it in, or you can just raise your hand, whatever is easier. And if you have no questions for the audience and you want to talk to me afterwards, I'm here. Yes, sir.
From Washington County, in the last 8 to 10 years, we've had South Africans come in, and they are some of the best people in the world. They can only stay so long. They were plumb tickled to have a job and to be treated the way they were. The government has stepped in now, and they're making it so difficult economically for the people that hire them to keep them here, even seasonal help in the elevators or in some cases on the farm. And you know, there's no help available in these small towns. Nobody wants to work. They don't have to work. And it's made a real dilemma.
Yeah, and I think that is a perfect example, because if our lawmakers were listening to the people who live in the communities who have this need, they wouldn't be proposing these same things. And I'll admit to you, South Africans are near and dear to my heart. My husband's from South Africa. And so he's had some friends who have come. I think it's an H-2B. I'm not sure. But yes, I think a part of the other problem with these temporary visas is that we put so many restrictions on employers. And some of them make, you know, the reasoning behind it is good, right? We don't want people to traffic people in and not pay them. We want to make sure there are some protections for workers, but at the same time, all of this is so cumbersome that it doesn't allow people who want to employ to be able to do it easily or honestly even in the time that you need them. So yeah, I think that is a wonderful example.
Is there actually a statistic that says gives the numbers of people that say they don't want to work?
Ooh, yeah. So the question, if you didn't hear it, are there statistics for people who don't want to work? So I can, I don't know. I can tell you that 1 in 11 people in the workforce in the United States, in Kansas rather, were born outside the United States. But of the people, I bet there are, because I've seen some numbers about working age people, but I don't know if that is broken down to people saying, I don't want to work.
I hear this all the time, that people don't want to work, but where are they? I don't see them in my community, but maybe other people do. We got the Lauderdale State Hospital out there, and you know, I mean, everybody that wants to work is working, and I think that's kind of a broad statement that people don't want to work. Where's that line?
No, and I think that's a good question. At least in my research with agriculture, it seems to be a lot of these people that employers, farmers that say, I'm advertising a job, no one's applying, but I think those statistics are more nationwide, but that's a really good point. Yes?
I just wanted to respond to Tom. I don't think it's that people don't want to work. I think it's the wages that people are paying and blaming it on not wanting to work.
I don't think there's a connection between all. I mean, they don't want to work at that job, but they're working.
Yes and yeah.
2 questions for you.
Sure.
That Farm Modernization Act, is it kind of mirrored on the old Bracero program?
So actually so the Bracero program was what we had in the 80s, and it allowed people from Mexico to come work for a season and then go back. That is actually what the H-2A program is. So the Bracero program morphed into the H-2A visa program.
I don't think the Bracero program had quite the number of hoops that you had to jump
Oh,
through.
absolutely not. No, it did not. And one of the clips with the station chief, he did talk about that, about how it has changed from in the 80s. You'd see people crossing the border, be like, you shouldn't be here, but we know you're going home, to suddenly all of this enforcement that suddenly made it so if I'm going to pay $10,000 to cross the border, well, I'm not going to go back and have to pay it again at the end of the season.
Second question. You hear this from conservative talking heads all the time, that immigrants drive down wages for American people. Personally, in agriculture, my experience is being immigrants do the hard, dangerous, and unpleasant jobs that white boys, frankly, don't want to do, at least at the wages they're paid. But the part about that is there's a lot of undocumented people in construction.
Yes.
Is there any, in your experience,
yes,
is there any truth to saying that immigrants drive down wages for American-born workers?
Yes, and let me tell you why. So a lot of times what happens, what I have seen, especially in construction, is you will get someone from a certain community, and they will either have a green card, they'll be a citizen, they'll be authorized to work. And what they will do is they will subcontract to people who they know do not have a lawful status. So then suddenly they become the gatekeeper. So maybe that person who's documented is getting paid fair wages, but then they're subcontracting out to be a whole lot cheaper.
So that's the employer.
Yes, so that is the employer. And I think, again, when we talk about immigration reform, we never talk about employers, because let's just generalize, when Republicans want to get support for certain things such as immigration, no one wants to demonize the business owners, right? No one wants to demonize the employers, but it's just a reality that, for example, if you want to hire someone right now as an employee, not as a subcontractor or freelancer, that's a different thing, you are required by federal law to fill out a form I-9. The I-9 form is where you have to show that you have a lawful status in the United States. The employer then is required to keep that form for 1 year. That's it. So at any time, if they are audited, they would have to show that form. If the employee's been here for more than a year, well, okay. If you destroyed the form, that's cool. They might get hit with a monetary fine, but it's not a deterrent. So again, we have a lot of, and that's the other thing that's also crazy about the immigration law. It is not unlawful to work without permission. There is no law stating that it is illegal to work without permission. It is unlawful for an employer to knowingly employ someone who does not have work authorization. Okay, so we talked about employees. What about contractors? Well, if they're a contractor, you have, I'm sorry, the law is just written really silly. If you have suspicion to believe that this person is not documented, then you are required to see if they have authorization to work. Well, if you're an employer, well, you don't want to be discriminatory. You don't want to assume that this person who doesn't look like me might be undocumented. You don't want to ask them. So we have all these loopholes that people are able to take advantage of, both on the employer and on the employee side. Truly, if you look at the immigration law, which I have a lot, it's been written by a drunk monkey. It is, there's so many parts of it that don't make sense with other parts. It's so piecemeal. There, again, are so many loopholes of ways to get around what we're trying to do that we truly just need to set it on fire and start again, because what we have is not working for anyone.
So let me respond to Tom's comment just a little bit before. We have a produce business, so we employ these three workers and never good. But there are times when we still don't have enough workers. So a few years ago, we went go downtown to the job center, there's a group of people always standing up, so day workers, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. So we went in, and at the time, minimum wage was $7.50. We came to a group of about 20 men, told them that what we were looking for, offered them $10 an hour, and asked them how many of them wanted to come. So they all got up their cell phones and were texting each other, calling each other, trying to find out something, whatever. Of that group of 20, I think we have 6 that came. We dropped them out to the field, went to work harvesting pumpkins, actually. One of them lasted about 20 minutes and said, I'm out of here. You know, he walked 5 miles back to town. And 2 of them lasted till lunch break and they were gone. 2 of them actually came back the next day. That was as far as it went.
Wow.
And so, you know, we talk about, yeah, there are jobs that a lot of people don't want to do.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yes, in the back.
Just to add a little context to Tom's question as well, which I think is actually a really good starting point for the conversation, because we use it sometimes as an excuse, but it really helped me as an employer to understand, like, I kept raising the wage I was offering. Obviously, we don't have the most glamorous work, but I feel like the work I offer is way better than anything that McDonald's has. And the pay is generally better as well. But the one thing that helped me realize is that the bottom 8% of the workforce is listed as unemployable. When we have unemployment rates at 3%, that means that when you're going out and trying to find employees, your options are to steal them from another spot, or to employ someone who's listed as unemployable, and they're listed as unemployable for a number of reasons. They could be unemployable because of an addiction. They could be unemployable because of a health condition. They could be unemployable because they want to be a stay-at-home mom. They want to retire. It's a large number of reasons that someone falls into the category of unemployable, but that really helped me as a employer get some grace, because I realized all I had to pick from was people who were considered unemployable, and sometimes you have to re-engineer your work staff, but and I do a lot of H2A employees as well, which I'm about 50-50 H2A versus local staff. But that in itself creates its own problem, because my local staff gets jealous of the H2A workers, because the lowest that I'm allowed to pay them is $18.25 an hour, plus I give them free room, free board, free food, free transportation back and forth to town, free transportation back and forth to their home country. And my local employer, or my local staff, get jealous of, even though they are very good hard workers, they get jealous of them, and because they get, quote, all the free things that they don't get. So there's a balance in there as well, unfortunately. The alternative is for the local workers to, try to outwork them and prove it, but that doesn't happen very often.
Yes.
So my question kind of piggybacks onto that. A lot of the reason why people are so anti-immigrant is there's this perception that they're getting all of these benefits. Mm-hmm. And so my question is, if you have a program where you've done the visa part legally for your agricultural employees, what benefits do they get from the tax or from the public money? Do they get any, or is that a myth, or is there benefits that they do have to get?
So that is a great question about what benefits that people just on visas would get. And so there are, we call it means-tested benefits. So there are certain benefits that only U.S. residents and citizens can get. So that's supplemental Social Security income, getting on Medicaid. But there are certain benefits that are available to everyone. So if you go to the emergency room, you can get medical care. You're not going to be kicked out because you can't pay. There are a lot of what we think of, so for example, food stamps, so SNAP benefits. even if you have a visa, you're not eligible for that. However, under the Women, Infant, Children, the WIC program, you can qualify for that regardless of what your immigration status is. So I think there's a lot of misnomers about, they're coming here and using all our benefits. I think a lot of that stems to what you very well articulated about the H-2A program, because a lot of visas, like the H-2A, do have requirements that employers have to provide certain accommodations, they have to pay a certain wage, they have to allow people to travel, which looks like a benefit, but then it is paid for by the employer. So a lot of the big benefits that we think of, food stamps, housing assistance, Medicaid, are not, even if someone was undocumented and applied for that, they wouldn't be eligible to get it. There's also a lot of fear, especially for undocumented people, about coming into contact with a government agency. So there really is a chilling effect for a lot of these people to think, I don't want to have any involvement with any state or federal agency. So even if, for example, their children who were born in the US might be eligible for food assistance, they still don't want to apply because they don't want to have any record of them or their family.
So that myth that they get 3 months of welfare benefits is a myth?
That is a myth, yes. Yes.
What do you think of the threat by President Trump to declare a national emergency in regards to immigration?
Sometimes you gotta laugh to keep from crying. So I am a survivor of the first Trump administration. Let me just tell you numbers. $20,000 is the amount it costs to deport one person from the United States. And I feel like it is a fun thing to say, let's deport everybody. Everyone in the United States has a right to due process. What he could do on day one is, if anyone is here with an unexecuted order of removal, so someone who didn't attend an immigration court date, someone who was ordered removed and never left, those are the people who could be deported immediately. Everybody else has the right to go in front of an immigration judge, to have the charges heard against them, and they have the right to apply for relief from removal if they're eligible. What that's going to do is it's going to clog up our system. In Kansas City, we have an immigration court. We have 3 judges. Each judge has, as of October 2024, 13,000 cases assigned to each one. It is such a broken system. I went to court last month and got a court date for a continuance for 2029. So what is going to happen is, number one, there's not going to be mass deportations. There might be people who come into contact with law enforcement, have an unexecuted order of removal that will be removed, yes. But for everybody else, they're just going to be in this legal limbo because, again, the Trump administration has this duality where they want to do a lot with immigration. They also don't want to spend any money on it. So what I think will happen is that we are just going to have a compounding crisis with our immigration system. We are going to have backlogs like you've never believed. Another great example, asylum. So I do a lot of asylum work. If you're applying for asylum outside of the court, I had a case, and I can almost measure it in like my own life events, that I've been married 10 years. I filed before I was married in 2012. We had an interview right after my son was born in 2017, and last week we got a decision. And my son will be 8 in January. Yeah, he is in 2nd grade. So I think that, again, we just need comprehensive immigration reform. The system we have now is not serving anyone, and the Trump administration is only going to muck it up further.
Real quick follow-up.
The rhetoric he uses sounds a lot like he wants to implement martial law. And so at that point, and with the existence of all these unregulated militias, how do you see that playing into? You have the administration, but you also have, these other entities outside of the administration that come into play.
I don't have a great answer for kind of martial law type things. I think that Again, we still have laws, so I think if anyone were to harm or unlawfully detain someone, they could still be criminally prosecuted. I do not think it's going to be the fire and brimstone that I think the Trump administration would like. I think, again, when we get down on a personal level, a lot of people, you know, really do think of immigrants as part of their community. Will there be some people who take advantage of that? I mean, probably. I also saw from the first Trump administration that a lot of this rhetoric is also meant to, again, the chilling effect for people using public benefits is to scare a whole lot of people who think like, you know what, let's go to Canada. Let's just go back to our home country because this is going to get really dangerous and we don't want to be here. So I think that's also kind of part of the reasoning for the rhetoric as well.